Hi everyone, Michael Brown here again. Welcome back to Educator.com's Adobe Photoshop CS6 course. In this lesson and the next one, we're going to talk about one of the most important items that you're going to be doing to your images. That is exposure and color corrections, both auto and manual. We're going to deal with auto exposure and color, manual exposure, and manual color, and how they relate to each other. Here are the various controls and the mantra of exposure and color, which you should remember and apply. Exposure affects color. Color does not affect exposure. Very simply, that means you do your exposure corrections first. If you do color corrections and then exposure, you will affect the color and have to go back and do it again. But if you do exposure first, then the color, you only have to do each one time. Now the auto exposure and color controls are auto tone, auto color, auto contrast. They have algorithms. Mostly it's a contrast adjustment which affects both exposure and color simultaneously. Each one uses different points of choice. The color uses dark and light colors. The auto tone uses monochromatic black and white contrast, and the auto contrast uses brightest and darkest of the existing colors. Auto brightness contrast is just an overall snap of the two. This one is new and it's the default auto control for CS6. Manual exposure controls, as I pointed out before, are brightness contrast, levels, curves, and shadows and highlights. Brightness contrast does everything. Curves gives you a little more control with midtone contrast. Curves can be set to control any portion of the exposure spectrum, and you can lock off any areas that you don't want to affect. A beautiful one. Shadows and highlights does exactly that. It opens up the shadows and it brings down your highlights. A really nice control. Under your color control, we have color balance, which is like a filter. You add or subtract color by using opposite colors. For example, blue is the opposite of yellow, so if you add blue, you're removing yellow. So it's blue and yellow, red and green, cyan and magenta. It's just a filter. Hue saturation adjusts the hue and saturation either overall of your image or of specific color channels: red, green, blue, yellow, magenta, and cyan, so you can specifically target individual color channels. Vibrance is like hue saturation, but it only deals with non-dominant colors, doesn't affect the very saturated colors, and it protects skin tones. So let's get started.